Video off.
Okay, so,
We have a few minutes to wait for people to join.
and Wayne, I can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now? Oh,
It's still weak.
Still very weak.
how about now?
Not much better.
No? Oh boy. That's not good. I have had this trouble once before and it magically disappeared, just like the coronavirus is going to do. And,
Can you go look at your microphone and see if it might have accidentally, the volume may have lowered?
I can look, but
Like where the mute button is, the up arrow there, just click on that and then you'll have a lot of choices and you can look at your mic and look at the volume level.
yeah. How about now? Is it better? Any better?
A little better.
How about now?
That's better. Sounds like it's in a tunnel, but it's better.
Yeah, if you go down to the bottom where it says audio settings.
Well, I don't have that. I've got my mute button and I have, oh, at the bottom there, yeah, audio settings.
Yeah, so that'll show you the level of the volume level.
Okay, I've just run into a problem. For some reason, I'm still having trouble with this presentation. It's not advancing.
Oh, no.
So I'm gonna have to mess around here. Let's see what I can do. Shoot.
To be honest, I like seeing you guys better than the printed stuff anyway.
Well,
But we
let me
don't.
read it. I don't know.
This,
Sure.
by the way, is probably being recorded, all of this, so.
Yes, you're right. No,
so,
I have not clicked record yet.
it's, okay, well, record to your PC and it will be truncated, I think. But the automatic recording is to the cloud is already being done. So why don't you go ahead and record to to your PC?
Okay, hang on.
And the attendees are here. We have 10
Yeah.
attendees already, so,
Okay,
and
and they're on. All right.
they're on. So, Nancy,
I'm not sure what to do.
did you restart the presentation?
I'm trying to do it from. Okay, I think I have it now.
Okay.
All right.
When you sound great.
Okay, good. Thanks for that tip, Laura. That helped a lot. I found that connection. I also changed my microphone to a different microphone. So
it is recording. Shall I?
let's, are we ready to start?
Yep.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on our community forums. Today's forum explores the concept of white privilege and its contribution to the persistence of systemic racism. It is being presented by 3 members of UUCC's Racial Justice Leadership Team: Pat Dillard, Valerie McFadden, and Nancy King-Smith. Nancy, take it away.
Okay. Well, Pat, Valerie, and I are pleased to present this forum on behalf of the Racial Justice Leadership Team at UU Congregation of Cleveland. The team formed prior to the reunification of First Church and UU Society, with members from both congregations participating. Our goal is to lead the congregation in developing and living out an intentionally anti-racist identity in all aspects of church life. Within the first month post-merger, we held worship services and an afternoon discussion of Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. In winter 2020, we offered the UU Institute curriculum, Beloved Conversations, through which 40 UUCC members participated in a weekend retreat and 8 additional weeks of small group meetings. By the end of the sessions, we were into COVID precautions, so had to meet virtually to wrap things up and to continue looking at how ideas from the small groups could be taken forward. Among things that have happened are the inclusion of racial justice as part of our new congregation's strategic plan, a candlelight vigil for George Floyd, and the impetus to hang a Black Lives Matter, a gay pride rainbow flag, along with an earth flag from the front of the church. We presented a worship service about beloved conversations in August, and now have 17 people participating in a virtual beloved conversations model this fall. We will continue to support other groups in the congregation to offer movies, book discussions, and other opportunities such as this forum to consider aspects of systemic racism. I'd like to give a shout out to the other members of the Racial Justice Leadership Team, Erica Brown, Pat, Christy Manning, Valerie, Rochelle Ajubi, myself, and Reverend Joe Cherry. So we're going to start with showing a short video, but we want that'll give some background into white privilege. The forum format will be a little different than some of the others. This time around, we want it to be as interactive as possible. We present ourselves not as experts, but as people who have come to understand white privilege in different ways through our lived experience. Bear with us as we work through the trying this slightly altered technology, but we'll be presenting some ideas interspersed with a couple of opportunities to share your thoughts and questions. Then at the end, we'll break into Zoom groups. For this forum, we'd like you to use the chat. If you're not familiar with it, you can find it probably at the bottom of your screen. And by clicking on it, you'll see any comments that people write in. Make sure you click on sending your chat message to panelists and attendees so that everyone can see it. Another icon you should see, again, probably at the bottom of the screen, is a raise hand button. There will be a couple of opportunities to vocalize your thoughts if you're willing. When you click on that button, we'll call on you and unmute you. So we're going to start with this video from John Amici, who is a psychologist, best-selling author, and also was formerly an NBA basketball player who actually played with the Cavaliers for a year. So here it is, and we'll listen to John Amici.
We've been engaged in a global conversation about race and racism. You've probably had discussions at home, at school, or at work, and in those conversations, you've probably heard the term white privilege. You may have even had this term used in a way that felt like an insult or an accusation. Others will have told you that it's all just made up to make white people feel bad, and none of this is right. Privilege is a hard concept for people to understand, because normally when we talk of privilege, we imagine immediate unearned riches and tangible benefits for anyone who has it. But white privilege, and indeed all privilege, is actually more about the absence of inconvenience, the absence of an impediment or challenge. And as such, when you have it, you really don't notice it. But when it's absent, it affects everything you do. There are lots of types of privilege out there. The privilege of being born into a wealthy family versus a poor family is kind of obvious. But then there's the privilege of being able-bodied versus having or acquiring a disability that most of us take for granted. I have two very close friends who are wheelchair users, and I'll be honest, when I first met them, I was completely ignorant about the everyday ways their lives are made harder through no fault of their own. Some of these ways are simply thoughtless, but some of them are just the way we live, just the way we build infrastructure, just the way everything works, that just makes their life harder than mine. That's just one of the ways that I'm privileged. And understanding that, embracing that, doesn't make me a bad person. But ignoring it raises the chance that my friends will be excluded in ways that are not obvious to me. And as their friend, I can't allow that. There's a good chance, as a white person watching this, your life is already hard. Every day you have to overcome some difficulty or challenge just to get by, but you can still have white privilege. White privilege doesn't mean you haven't worked hard or you don't deserve the success you've had. It doesn't mean that your life isn't hard or that you've never suffered. It simply means that your skin color has not been the cause of your hardship or suffering. There is nothing but a benefit to understanding our own privileges, white and otherwise. It brings us closer to those who are different. It helps us be vigilant about the ways we treat others different than us. It helps us make a society that is fairer and more equal. Having white privilege doesn't make your life easy, but understanding it can help you realize why some people's lives are harder than they should be.
Okay, Pat is going to take us forward.
Welcome. Welcome.
Whoops,
That proves it's a live show. We would have fixed that if this wasn't live. Welcome.
I will get rid of it. There we go.
We're ready for the next slide with John.
Yes, I'll get back to that. Yeah,
We're just learning, folks.
yep. Okay, back a bit. All right. I'm going to, while you get started, I need to get back to the other.
Get back to John.
Yeah, and here we go.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead. The speaker in the video, John Amici, identified privilege as the absence of a barrier, something people with privilege do not necessarily see. That is, our privilege is invisible to us. And I'd like to get a little shot of John there if we can.
We're dealing with the problem we had earlier of which one we're on. Let me try this.
There.
That's the old one. Okay. I'm afraid you should go ahead and while I try again to find the.
Okay, well, we'll catch up with some very interesting pictures of John later. Our next section will revolve around a landmark article by Peggy McIntosh entitled White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. McIntosh is an American feminist, anti-racism activist, scholar, and a senior research fellow at the Wellesley Centers for Women. She received her undergraduate degree at Radcliffe College and her PhD from Harvard University. Although she wrote her Invisible Knapsack article in 1989, unfortunately, white people's invisible knapsacks are still quite full. Today, we will discuss what is in our knapsacks. Back in the day, McIntosh started thinking about privilege as male privilege. She observed that men did not recognize male privilege, just as whites do not recognize white privilege. It's part of the bubble that we each live in. McIntosh recognized that male privilege and white privilege exist as a package of unearned assets that one cashes in each day and is generally oblivious of. McIntosh describes her understanding of white privilege as advantage based solely on race, which can be observed both systemically and individually. It's like all earned privileges in life, including those related, are we getting it? Okay, including those related to class, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, ability, and more. Of course, these privileges are intertwined and interconnected, and any given individual or group may have several types of privilege. In her article, McIntosh identified 36 of her own everyday advantages from being a white person. Here we go. There's John Amici.
Yeah.
There's John Amici. And we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
And there's Peggy McIntosh. And we can go to the next slide. And there's a man who believes in male privilege. Whoops, we missed him. He was there so quickly. There he is.
I've got to turn off.
He believes that male privilege is a myth. And then the next one. And here are the list of some of the intersectionality of the various types of privilege that different people and different groups would have, which we mentioned earlier. Next. Is when you think, we'll stick on that one a second. Privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. In her article, McIntosh identified 36 of her own everyday advantages. We'll look at just 6 of these together. And after we look at these 6, we're going to open the conversation so you can share in the discussion of other privileges of white people that you have observed. Next slide. The first example from Peggy is, if a police officer pulls me over, I can be sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. Number 2, I can conveniently buy posters, postcards, picture books, greeting cards, and children's magazines featuring people of my race. Number 3, I can take a job with an affirmative action employer without having coworkers on the job suspect that I got it because of my race. Number 4, I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. When I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my race made it what it is. If my day, week, or year is going badly, I need not ask of each negative episode or situation whether it has racial overtones. Now the discussion will be open for you to join us. We're going to open the conversation so you can share in the discussion of other privileges that you have observed. Use the chat, remembering to send it to panelists and attendees, or if you would like to share out loud, please click on the hand at the bottom of your screen so we'll call on you. Now's the time to click on the hand.
Okay, we're going to call on Bob Adams.
Unmute.
Yep. Bob, are you?
Yeah, I'm.
Okay. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Unmute yourself, Bob.
You can unmute him.
You're still muted.
I believe Nancy has to unmute him.
I'm asking you to unmute, Bob.
Trying and
You may not be able to. Yeah.
now I'm fine. Oh, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. In a meeting with a church group with another fellowship I belong to, we were discussing the problems of the LG, etc. community, and one of the speakers used the phrase "those people," and he was immediately called for that as an indicator, an unconscious indicator on his part that he was treating them as others.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that all the time, unfortunately, without paying attention. And so just the normal conversations that we have are loaded with phrases that have implications for other kinds of people that we are unconscious of.
That's right. There's a lot of self-education that we need to do with ourselves.
And
Thank you, Rob.
all the efforts to define white privilege or privilege in general, I think are useful because we haven't paid much attention to that since it was part of our unconscious background.
I don't see any other hands up. Are there comments in the chat about people paying attention to thinking of examples of white privilege? I do see we have a hand up from Carol Steiner, so I've asked you to unmute.
Hi, can you
Hi,
hear?
we can hear you, yes.
I frequently notice that I am speeding when I'm driving, and I don't have to worry about that in the same way that African American people do.
Yep, good point.
There are a few comments in the chat. Would you like me to read them?
Yeah, and then I have a comment from Mary Schatzman that I'll call on after you do that.
Okay, from Liz, all my teachers look like me, and the vast majority, all of my children's teachers look like them. Elizabeth mentions advancement opportunities within organizations. Ed says, I've experienced a number of episodes in which I was waiting at a counter at which a Black person had arrived first, yet the clerk would attempt to serve me first. And Susan mentions that I think that how old you are can be used affirmatively or negatively. Now that people are losing jobs and trying to find them, discrimination against older people, especially African American ones, can be used against them.
Okay, Mary, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, apologies to Pat because she's heard this before, but over the summer this year, I went out of state on a vacation and I was driving, and this was in the last part of June, and the first part of June was my birthday and my driver's license expired. But we'd been told by our governor not to necessarily run out and get our driver's licenses renewed. And so I hadn't. But then I was thinking, what if I'm stopped by a New York police of some sort? And then I hand over my driver's license and it's like expired. So the thing is that I went ahead and did it, and I had great confidence that nothing really bad would happen to me. But if I had not been white, I don't know whether I would have had that confidence. And it's similar to, who was it, Carol, that said speeding.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the same level of anxiety. That's it.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. So Pat, do you have a couple more, and then we'll move on to Valerie?
Right. Lori would like to let us know that the UUCC book club discussion on November 8th will be the book, So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Iluo. And she also said that she can only pick two panelists, not two panelists and attendees on her screen. I'm not sure why. But there is an interesting book club discussion coming up on November 8th. It's a good book if you haven't read it yet.
Okay. And also, Valerie has put the link to Peggy McIntosh's article that has a longer list of these examples of white privilege in it. You can save that link and we'll post it again later at the end of the session. Valerie, and I'll get back to screen share.
Okay.
Hopefully easier than I did last time.
Oh, we got new messages.
So we've talked a little bit about what's in our personal knapsacks. And now I'm going to step back for an overview of the kinds of tools generally found in the knapsacks of white people as a group. Today we're using a framework that highlights the themes that occur when studying white privilege. Just a heads up that when I give statistics by race, I'll include the figures for Blacks and whites, but not other ethnic groups. This is for two reasons: to improve the flow of the presentation and to highlight the largest differences. The four themes I will address are on the screen, and they are giving white people the benefit of the doubt, centering white culture and people as the norm, access to power, and access to wealth. Benefit of the doubt. I most associate this phrase with teenagers and their misdemeanors, shoplifting, traffic violations, some kind of mischief. Black youth experience harsher treatment and more severe penalties from both police and school officials in such situations. For example, Black students experience disproportionately high rates of suspension and expulsion. According to statistics from the U.S. Department of Education, 5.3% of public school students were suspended during the 2013-14 school year. 13.7% of those were Black, as contrasted with only 3.4% of whites. One factor driving this stark difference is the way Black youth, and indeed Black people, are perceived. A 2014 article published by the Journal of Social Psychology describes several studies on how race colors perception. In one experiment, researchers had students rate the innocence of people ranging from infants to 25-year-olds who were Black, white, or of an unidentified race. The students judged children up to 9 as equally innocent regardless of race, but considered Black children 10 and older significantly less innocent than other children. The students were also shown photographs next to descriptions of various crimes and asked to assess the age and innocence of white, Black, and Latino boys between the ages of 10 to 17. The students overestimated the age of Blacks by an average of 4.5 years and found them more culpable than whites or Latinos, particularly when the boys were matched with serious crimes. The study found evidence that overestimating age and culpability based on racial differences was linked to dehumanizing stereotypes that were sometimes unconscious. I think the source of these stereotypes goes all the way back to dehumanizing Africans to provide a moral justification for colonialism and slavery. They operate differently and more subtly today, but are still powerfully effective. Norms. Centering white people and culture as the norm is probably the type of privilege that is most invisible. So here are a couple of examples. Literature and history have been predominantly defined by the white experience. Whiteness is taken as the default unless otherwise specified. I have read countless novels where as soon as a non-white person shows up, the author immediately describes their skin color, most often comparing it to coffee, either with or without milk, chocolate, caramel, or cinnamon. Occasionally, various types of wood provide the image. It's often the first thing you learn about the character, for the writer finds it essential to establish them as other, that is, not white. Another example of centering whiteness is found in the way world history is still commonly defined. It centers European history and the white perspective on colonialism in the post-colonial period. Other history is either separate, like Asian history, or hyphenated, like African American history. In either case, it's not an integral part of the whole, but an optional add-on. In high school, I was fortunate enough to take an elective course in African American history. It was an excellent course, which had a lasting impact. My high school friends on Facebook have reminisced fondly and gratefully about this course. However, there were over 900 people in my graduating class and 30 in the African American history class. Considering how integral African American history is to American history as a whole, and how little it was covered in the American history course, this was a tragic lost opportunity. There has been some progress in this area, particularly at the university level, where a more inclusive world history has replaced Western civilization courses. But there is still a long way to go. For instance, until recently, world history was not a required subject for Ohio high school students. In 2014, the Ohio State Legislature passed a bill that added a half-year world history course to graduation requirements. Before that, half-year courses in American history and American government were the only graduation requirements in history. While this is an improvement, it seems we have still a long way to go in giving our students the foundation they need to participate intelligently in our democracy and engage with the wider world. Access to power. The third category we're addressing is privilege as power. Now, access to power varies greatly within the white community based on factors such as class, wealth, and social networks. But there is a certain type of power that is available to white people simply as a result of their membership in the dominant group. And several people have commented on this in our earlier discussion. This power is grounded in centering whiteness as the norm, but it translates into the ability to operate in the world in a way that it's not available to people of color who are operating in spaces dominated by white power. Peggy McIntosh talks about it in a way that speaks to me deeply because she is describing a state that is so foreign to my personal experience as an African American. She says, I see a pattern running through the matrix of white privilege, a pattern of assumptions that were passed on to me as a white person. There was one main piece of cultural turf. It was my own turf, and I was among those who could control the turf. My skin color was an asset for any move I was educated to want to make. I could think of myself as belonging in major ways and of making social systems work for me. Access to wealth. The final category in our framework is access to wealth. According to a Brookings Institute report, in 2016, the median wealth of white families was $930,000, meaning half of white families had accumulated assets worth over $930,000, while half had wealth below that number. The authors note that white family wealth is more influenced by very rich families and does not characterize the typical experience. For Black families, half had accumulated wealth of over $138,000, while half had family wealth below that amount. That is a gap of almost $800,000. So what can these differences in wealth do for you? Look at how wealth can impact your experience in our criminal justice system. To start with, you can avoid being arrested for crimes related to poverty, like being unable to pay fines and court costs. And you're less likely to have a warrant out for your arrest. If there is no warrant out for you, you're less likely to run or resist arrest if stopped by a police officer. If you are arrested, you can post bail. If you are out on bail, you can continue to work and are less likely to lose your job. If you're charged with a crime, you can hire a lawyer and are less likely to be convicted or forced into a bad plea bargain. If you're really rich, even if you're sentenced to do time, you may get to go to a nicer prison, especially if you also have powerful friends. Wealth is also very important in providing for your family. It allows you to provide higher education for your children, perhaps help them with a down payment on a house or to start a business, and ultimately to inherit assets from your estate. The intergenerational transfer of wealth is a precious gift for your descendants. I've given a few examples of how white privilege operates through each of our 4 categories: giving white people the benefit of the doubt, centering white culture and people as a norm, granting access to power and access to wealth. I encourage you to continue to explore this topic and how it affects you and those around you. And now Nancy King-Smith will guide us through the rest of today's program.
Okay, again, we'll put the, and Valerie, if you could put the link up again in the chat of Peggy McIntosh's article, and written, what, 25 years ago, but still germane. And now we want an opportunity for anyone who would like to share either out loud or in the chat with any further thoughts, questions, experiences you might want to share. While you're getting organized for that, I'll just let you know that shortly we will be at the end of this part with all of us together and sharing. We will let you know the process for breaking into smaller breakout groups for more in-depth discussion around your experience, but also what as if you're white, we can do about it at this point, and how to use this knowledge in terms of helping break down systemic racism. I see that Bob is has something he wants to add. So Bob, you should be able to speak at this point.
Right. Thank you. I presume you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
This conversation has led me to think a little bit about why we're in this state and what we are trying to do to get out of it, to improve it. And it occurred to me that there are 2 aspects that are probably separate. The first thing we're doing is finding the occasions the unconscious occasions and making them conscious of what might be doing wrong. And we're exploring those and trying to figure out what to do about them. But the other aspect is in our evaluation of, quote, other people, we have expectations. And when people don't live up to our expectations of them, we often are critical without paying much attention to why that situation may have occurred. And I think understanding the history and the culture associated with the activities of the people we're being uncomfortable with are part of the understanding that we need to come up with in searching for answers of what to do about our current situation.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bob. I don't see any more hands up. All right, Kemp Smith, how about that? I'll allow him to talk from the other room. Okay. Wait a second. You're.
There we go.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of unpacking that can be done around the concept of the access to wealth. The reality is that majority of wealth in this country, at least except for the super wealthy, comes from building equity in a home. And if we historically look at access to building home equity, we find that Blacks were precluded from participating in purchasing of home by a variety of structural means. There was the practice of redlining, which meant that Black families were prohibited from gaining mortgages in order to be able to purchase a home. There was the practice of individual communities writing into their deeds that it was whites only. There was the practice of the GI Bill, which made assets and opportunities available to soldiers returning from World War II, but in fact, very few of those advantages were given to Blacks. And remains the access to education, quality education, which is almost entirely based on real estate values. So that if you're in an area which has higher valued homes, you have access to better quality education, which allows you to build on future opportunities. So there is an entire history of structural biases that have been built into our system, which specifically discriminate against Blacks. And I think understanding and really thinking about and then doing something about undoing that long history is an important task that we're going to have to undertake if in fact we're actually going to make any structural changes.
I did not prime him for that. I don't see any other hands raised at the moment, but I know there have been some active chat things. Pat and Valerie, do you want to pull a few of those out, and we'll see if anybody else wants to join in this larger conversation.
Sure. DD writes, the history of redlining in the US and how neighborhoods were invested or not invested has led to educational, economic, health, and other inequity that persists in significant ways today. really going along with what Kemp said earlier. And also by DD, leaders in many institutions are white, from government to schools, universities to businesses. When you do not see leaders who share your experience and culture, it can be harder to feel included.
Valerie,
you want to do a couple, Val?
Sure. Let's see.
Lori has another announcement.
Let's see, from Susan Alcorn. Oh, this is earlier, I guess. Wait a minute. Okay, from DD, leaders in many institutions are white. Did we read this?
Yeah, we just did that one.
Okay.
The one following that one we didn't do.
Okay.
Okay, from Lori Albright. If folks would like to engage in with a local author, David Patterson, on the Black history with a focus on Cleveland, this Tuesday from 8 to 9:30 is an online forum, The First 400 Years, October 13th. And let's see. Elizabeth Meese says she would like to share comments live.
Okay, I don't see her hand up, but I can absolutely allow her to do that. Okay, I've asked, you need to unmute. There you go. Okay, you should be live now. Nope, now you're muted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I cannot hear you. So, but if you can hear me, I'll just go ahead and talk. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that it's important to have appropriate diversity in leadership. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I can't hear you. And so I'm thinking, I work at the VA hospital, and I know that there's been, when I went to one of the sort of larger safety meetings, I was stunned. There were 30 people in the room, and every single one of them was white. And I knew that the diversity of the employee population was more 30% Black, and I could not believe that we didn't have Black leadership. And I think that we have to be proactive in making sure that we have Blacks be advanced, even if they don't have the credentials that other white people have. I think we have to be way more proactive. The other issue is about how do we do reparation reconciliation. And I know that my son had tried a project with my family that was from Virginia, with, that dates back to Jamestown. And so that we know that our wealth came from a lot of Afro-American slaves. And so my son did a project where trying to find all the progeny for the slaves so that we could redistribute our wealth. And it was surprisingly pretty well accepted by the family. However, it was really hard to find the descendants. And I would be interested in proactive ideas from the group of how do we move forward to make it more fair? What do we do so that we can give housing opportunities for Afro-Americans, for more affluent communities? I'm done with my comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Beth. And let's take a few minutes for other comments and ideas. I think with white privilege, it is partly it's an early step in a much longer process of things we need to do. And so let's see. Kemp, did you want to speak again? If so, yeah, I saw your hand up again.
I didn't put it up again, so
Oh, okay, all
I'm
right.
not sure what that was about.
Well, okay, anybody else?
Just to follow up on that reparations issue, the next covenant group of authentic diversity at the church is going to be discussing reparations. So if you're interested in the subject and joining our covenant group, you might want to let us know and join it. Lori Albright will be leading the discussion. We'll have some readings ahead of time.
Lori, I have unmuted you if you wanted to say anything more.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, this is of course, a complicated and important topic. I attended at the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association virtually in June, a number of workshops related to anti-racism. One of those was specifically on reparations. There were 3 amazing leaders who had a lot of very interesting, practical, and healing kinds of recommendations going forward. And so we're going to dive into that on next Monday, October 19th is the next monthly meeting of our Authentic Diversity group. And we would love to encourage other people to join us on our journey with that, which is both self-reflection and how we can support our congregation in being as anti-racist as we can imagine. The other thing that I would like to note is for whatever reason, I've never experienced this before, but in the chat, all I can do is choose the all panelists thing. And so I just also wanted to highlight what Valerie also read regarding David Patterson's book, The First 400 Years. That forum, which is next Tuesday evening from 8 to 9:30, is at peaceactioncleveland.org if you'd like to register for that. So it's all one word, peaceactioncleveland.org to register for that. This was a great book. I work with David Patterson on the ACLU action team on bail reform, and very much appreciate the scholarship that he has put into it, both nationally as well as some very interesting local political things that I did not know about my adopted town, Cleveland, before. So hope you can join us on either or both of those opportunities.
Okay. Another opportunity coming up soon is Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, will be speaking through Cuyahoga County Public Library coming up soon. We're going to shift gears now to give everyone a chance to talk in more depth about exploring white privilege in small groups. So Wayne, is there a way we can copy the chat so we have these resources available?
Copy the chat. You should just be able to click on the chat. Hopefully your browser will interpret that as a link to the other meeting.
Right, we will have that short. Yeah, don't click on it yet. But I was asking if there is a way that we can save all of the.
Oh, yes, the chats get copied. They should be saved.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
We will try to make sure that those resources are available, including the link to Peggy McIntosh's article. So before we conclude, what we'll be doing is having people actually join a Zoom meeting where it is possible to have small breakout groups. I see some people have already chosen to drop and may already have been joining that, but don't click on it yet. And in that, we will divide into smaller groups to really share your experiences. So, but I want you to take these thoughts with you. Over the next week, try and take notice of whiteness around you. Where and when do you see whiteness? If you're white, try to say to yourself, even in some of the more routine aspects of your life, this happened to me because I'm white. Be open to discussing insights about what you noticed or experienced as you go through this exercise. For example, when someone says scientist, what image comes to mind? When walking down the street, watch how people react to you and ask yourself, would that have gone differently if I were not white? Play with this and look for opportunities to recognize how whiteness establishes itself every day in very routine ways as the norm. And then be ready to act. Being a white ally is not denying the power and privilege that your whiteness brings you, but rather asking how you can use it in the struggles to ameliorate the effects of white supremacy on Black persons and communities. I also want to announce next week's forum. The 18th of October will be on COVID-19, research, projections, and the future with Dr. Amy Ray, Director of the Metro Health System Infection Prevention, and also with Case Professor of Medicine and the Infectious Disease Society of America. So join us next week for that. The link for the discussion is in the chat. If it doesn't work to just click on it, you can copy it and put it in your browser. You'll then be asked if you want to leave the webinar and join another meeting, which you will need to do. We'll give people a couple of minutes to join and then break people into groups of 5 or 6, planning to finish around 10:45. So we hope to see you shortly. There's also a phone number you can use to call in if you're not on a computer or tablet. So thank you to all who participated in the forum, and we hope to see you shortly in the webinar.
I hope it's working.
I hope so. We're down to 14, 13 people are leaving, so hopefully they're going into the chat meeting.
Can you tell if they're in the Zoom?
I cannot. Nancy can, but I cannot, and she has left to go take care of that. So
Yeah, I thought I better stay here just in case it's not working.
well,
I put it in twice, but it came out in 2 lines. I don't know why that is. Well, I have my phone if there's a problem.
hi Susan, you're mute. You're mute. Mute.
I don't know how to get into the smaller group.
Well, if you look in your chat, there should be a link. If you look, open up your chat window and
It's second from the bottom. Lori has a comment.